And welcome to this edition of Rise of the Warrior Leader. Today we'll be looking at a new approach to leadership. Now, there's been extensive research on what constitutes good leadership. This is because this topic has immense importance on us. A bad leader can make life very difficult for every single one of us. Now, regardless whether you've read an academic paper backed up by rigorous research or even a leadership book, of which there's an abundance, even if you have not read any of these, I'm pretty sure that you will know good leadership when you see it. In recent years, there are plenty of examples of bad leadership. An example, during full lockdown, if we look at the US and the UK, their leaders in 2020 were holding daily press briefings, informing the public that they were going to be okay, that we were going to get through this. Now, regardless of what you may think of these leaders, or even whether you believe what they were saying, the point is that in times of crisis, people need information. Communication is crucial, and communication needs to be brief and frequent. So frequent, as you saw, the daily briefings, and brief because when people are in survival mode, they want information in bullet point. They want long stories, and the eloquence of the typical politician goes out the window. People want data. Now, there were other countries who did not have such regular briefings, and the briefings were in the form of merely to tell the nation or the public what change there would be in the level of lockdown. So this could have been every month, every 3 weeks, and so forth, which is not sufficient. The changing landscape we see before our eyes is often down to the disruptions and the unintended consequences through actions. Now, we can dissect the reason for the changing landscape, but pretty sure we can all agree that something has changed. The status quo of business as usual is no more. If we listen to the words of former Allied Supreme Commander General Wesley Clark, there is no more business as usual anymore. So what times are we living in? What is this landscape all about? So commentators have differing views on to explain what days we're living in. This has been described as the age of globalization, where there's this interconnectivity amongst the world, where any action in the one country or region could impact the other. We're interconnected through energy, through the global oil supply, through trade, economics. There was a cover on The Economist some years ago with a picture of America sneezing, and the caption was, "America sneezes, the world catches a cold," which sums up globalization. But the world today has also been described as the information age, where everybody has access to information. Not long ago, you needed to be an academic or learned of a particular social standing to be able to access the best schools and best libraries and so forth. That is the case no more. Even if you're from the most rural little village in Africa or in Asia, you've got the same access to information on the internet as somebody in the library at Harvard or Yale in the US. An extension of this is also the knowledge age, the worker knowledge age, where everybody in your team has access to information on their social media, which also opens the way for corruption, where the minds of people in the team could be polluted by the competitor and through fake news, which Collins Dictionary called the word of the year for 2017. It has become a real problem. There's also artificial intelligence, where a computer-generated video could emerge of you saying something you did not actually say. But we also hear of Industry 4.0, where there's a fully integrated system of logistics and manufacturing, incorporating such things as the Internet of Things, but also with 3D printers changing the landscape even further. And these days have also been described as VUCA. Now, this is a term which was originally used in the military in the 1990s to describe the modern-day battlefield, where nothing is clear-cut, and it's a multipolar ordered world. Increasingly, we've heard this word being used in the mainstream media and even in boardrooms, which stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. But rather than debate which of these three apply to today, let's leave that for historians in 100 or 200 years' time. Today, can we agree that they all carry validity, each posing challenges which are very real? These new challenges require a new approach, a new concept to leadership, ownership-driven leadership. It is a broad concept, but encompasses responsibility and accountability. Responsibility is often associated with a task to be undertaken or being undertaken, where accountability is usually used when there's a lack of action or the task is complete. There's accountability for actions. However, the word ownership does not concern with semantics. It's both. It's broad. But there are three components to this. And ownership is a word which is used in the military where there's little room for tolerance on the unforgiving realm of the battlefield. Excuses, it's just hot air. Now, the three components of ownership is, first is to own who you are. Second is to own the mission. And the third is to own the result. So if we look at owning who you are, this is a critical component for self-leadership. Now, if you cannot hold a space for yourself or support yourself, that means you require others to support you. That means you're taking in from the system around you, the ecosystem, where your job as a leader is to feed in to the ecosystem. It's a selfless action, not because of self-interest, but serving others. Resilient leaders build resilient organizations. Now, we all have a story, and we all have a story that we would rather not tell people. This is something we are not proud of, perhaps ashamed of. Carl Jung refers to this as the shadow. Now, in order to overcome the shadow, we need to first accept it. You cannot change any aspects of yourself unless you accept the shadow. If you do not liberate it, it continues to oppress. But how do you liberate yourself from this? It goes with going within, to face it, and to embrace your dark side. There's a duality in everything, the yin and the yang. It's an energy, the male and the female. Even Martin Luther, when he said that love without power is anemic, but power without love can be abusive. This is akin to a tyrant. We need both. This is achieved through meditation and self-reflection. In turn, the leader then engenders the same in the collective, so that the collective can also move their consciousness up Maslow's pyramid. Now, this brings us to the second component, is to own the mission. Now, I'm pretty sure you've heard the saying, you've got to give 100%, or even 110%, especially in sporting events. When the halftime, or when somebody's trying to psych you up for the challenge, we often forget that if we believe in the mission, if we harness the power of belief, commitment is just a natural consequence. It starts with belief. Napoleon Hill, who you may know is the author of the book Think and Grow Rich, one of the greatest self-development books. And this book took 21 years to write, and he interviewed over 500 people, amongst which John D. Rockefeller, who was the wealthiest man in the world at the time, Andrew Carnegie, the second wealthiest, Henry Ford, well known for the Ford motor car, which was the first industrial commercially available automobile, and Edison, who went down in history as the inventor of the light bulb, but also 2,000 patents to his name. And what Napoleon Hill said was, thoughts are things. That thoughts, when they become emotionalized with belief, they become a burning desire. Now, to understand the power of thoughts, we need to first understand that it's driven by the mind. And the mind consists of the subconscious and the conscious mind. And in terms of power, according to Dr. Bruce Lipton, the subconscious mind is 500,000 times more powerful than the conscious mind. It never stops. It is always working. And unfortunately, for most people, it is working against them. So how do we get the subconscious mind to work for you? How do we program the subconscious mind? Well, there are certain steps. The first is to understand your purpose. Why are you doing what you're doing? The second is to use auto-suggestion, which today is referred to as affirmations, but these need to be personalized to you and to evoke some sort of emotion. We also need to visualize, and you need to visualize yourself physically achieving what you want to do. It's got to be real, as if you're seeing yourself in a movie. And lastly, endless repetition. Repeat, repeat. And it's through this persistence where these neural pathways are created. And it's about reintegrating this. But if there's no burning desire, then there will be no result. Or if there's a weak desire, you will have a weak result. Remember, small fire will create a small heat. But no desire will create no fire and no heat. It is at this point, when you have this burning desire, that you have the musts. No more shoulds or coulds. Must. There are many ways to bring this about. In history, an extreme example is, I'm sure you've heard the expression, burn the boats. This was a story about Hernan Cortez, who led an invasion from Spain into the Aztec Empire, current-day Mexico. What his men didn't know is that they were outnumbered 100 to 1. He knew that. So before the men could find that out, he burnt all the boats. He ordered the boats to be burnt. Because if they found that out, they would surely surrender or try to swim back and die in the process. But after burning the boats, the options were pretty clear. Either we win and we survive, and some of us will die, or all of us will die. The burning obsession to win was created, and they went on to win the battle. See, a target only becomes a target when you make it a question of life and death. This is the mindset that you need to have to take on challenges, no matter how big or small. So if we look to our forebears, our ancestors knew the power of this. If they would face their biggest challenge, amongst which would feature a hand-to-hand fight on the battlefield till the death, what would they do? They would have a war cry before to get themselves in that zone. I'm sure you're familiar with the word slogan. What if I told you that the word slogan has its roots in a battle cry? How so? Well, the word slough of slogan refers to people or army, and germ is to call. So in peacetime, this would be a means to gather the people together to make an announcement. So this would be a gathering cry. However, in wartime, a slogan would be gathering people together to get them ready for battle. It'll be a battle cry. So it's a Gaelic word which then entered into the English vernacular. But it's not easy. To take on these challenges is not easy. But if we keep in mind that every heartache carries an equal benefit, an opportunity disguised, and that is where the growth lies. It's in these challenges. The alternative is regret. So regardless of whether we succeed or not, if we do not even attempt, we can always look back and say, what if I tried? And the regret is much worse, regardless of what the result actually is. And regardless of the result, the byproduct will always be pride and character. It will be a lesson learnt. Now, in taking on challenges, it's important to keep in mind that there will be 3 Ps. So the subconscious mind is on board with you, but still, it may not necessarily be plain sailing. The 3 Ps, which I remind people, are patience. So nothing happens overnight. The only instant thing is instant coffee, and that's not even that nice. Persistence. So there's a soft persistence, which is perseverance, and then the hard persistence, which is determination, grit, vasbyt, as they say in Afrikaans. And patience and persistence is often referred to as sabr in Arabic, which is to remain steadfast in the face of challenges. And the 3rd P is perspiration, because it will take work, and there will be a measure of discomfort. Prepare yourself for that. It's not only about getting your mind ready to take on the challenge. Even during the challenge, that mindset needs to be maintained throughout until the job is done. Which brings us to the last component of ownership, is to own the result. Now, the first 10 years when I was an adult in the military, I would take on the biggest challenge that was on offer. Whatever was on offer at that time, I would put my name down for that. And whenever I would succeed, I would collapse to recover, to lick my wounds, to get ready for the next battle. I would not celebrate because I didn't know how to celebrate. I was too young. No one told me, no one taught me. It was only years later, after a burnout, that I realized the power of celebration and the power of celebrating even the small victories, so that when the big victory arrives, it's been a climatic build-up and you know how to celebrate. Otherwise, if you don't celebrate throughout, suddenly you hit the big one and you wake up the next morning and you say, nothing's changed. My life is still the same. You wake up the next morning, the birds still look the same. They sound the same, because you didn't celebrate. And that was always a disappointment for me. However, by being in the moment and having gratitude for what you've got and enjoying the journey by celebrating the small victories makes the world of difference. Now, this is speaking from a personal point of view. In a team environment, when the results don't go your way, what often emerges is a backstabbing culture. And this is where there's a lack of accountability and everybody's trying to pass the blame on to the next person. But it's about everybody owning their part. If you're a leader and you delegated a role and that does not go according to plan, the task delegated or the role, sure, that person was responsible. However, you were the one that delegated it. A measure of accountability is retained. And that needs to be understood. Now, if we look at broader society in the modern day justice system, if a result doesn't go as intended, or if you've committed something which is legally or morally incorrect, there's a modern day justice system in place where the concept is you get sentenced, you serve your time, and there is a forgiveness, a reconciliation reconciliation, where you're then provided the opportunity to reintegrate back into society. However, on social media, this is not always the case. So we spoke about forgiveness, reconciliation. On the other end of the continuum, so if we had this continuum, call it the poor result continuum. It's a lack of ownership of the result. On the one side, reconciliation, forgiveness, and on the other extreme, unforgiveness and cancel culture. Now, when the social media police turn against you, this is referred to as you becoming cancelled. This is a new phenomenon which has come to the fore in the last decade. The reality is, regardless of how much good you have done, one bad move could be your lasting legacy. This is the risk. Mike Tyson summed it up. He was 37-0 in boxing terms. This is 37 fights, 37 wins, no losses. World champion, Guinness Book of Record holder for the youngest heavyweight champion of the world, and he was undisputed, which means that he was the linear champion and he beat all other heavyweights. He went into a fight. He was the 42-1 favorite against James Buster Douglas. Tyson got knocked out. So on paper, he only had one loss, right? 37 wins against one loss. Still good, would you say? Press conference, he said, "You're only as good as your last fight." Does that mean that your whole legacy goes out the window and now you are knocked out in one round and that is who you are? That is how you're going to be remembered forever? I challenge this view. You define your story. And every day you are writing your story. And this is what we need to engender in the collective, in our people, that they have the opportunity to define their story, to take ownership and inspire ownership-driven leadership for you to own who you are, own the mission, and own the result. Thanks for listening. Claudio.